You set foot on foreign soil. Only this land isn't ruled by any country or government. In this land, we celebrate music. In this land, we celebrate games. In this land, we celebrate those who compose video game music. Welcome to the VGMbassy. Welcome and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the VGMbassy. This is a show centered around video game music and the amazing online community of fans and podcasters that enjoy it. My name's Ed, and on each episode I'll take the role of Prime VGM Minister and invite a guest VG Ambassador onto the show to share with us their own video game music culture. Or I may share a part of my culture on a solo show. This is episode 98, getting so close to our episode 100 celebration. And it's a long time coming. We've got another blind listen. It's been, I think episode 79 was the last time we did a blind listen with Joe. We listened to the Burn Cycle soundtrack, which was a lot of fun. With me today is longtime fan, longtime supporter, longtime friend, Cam Werme. Welcome back to the show, dude.
Hey, thanks for having me. Doing well. Just getting over a bit of a viral thing, so I'm going to try to not be coughing constantly.
'Tis the season for respiratory infections.
It is indeed.
So you've never done a blind listen before?
No, I haven't, and I always enjoy them when they're on, and I feel like a little intimidated, honestly, because sometimes when you guys are doing these, your speculative skills are impressive. You can divine things from the tracks that has always kind of impressed me, so I'm hoping I can hang.
Sometimes our quote-unquote impressive divinations end up being completely wrong at the end.
Yeah, but, you know, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, so UtopiaNemo, former guest on the show and another longtime supporter, has submitted a soundtrack to us. And he's also submitted an audio intro that we're going to listen to first. And then when we come back from that, we'll kind of explain how the show works. And we'll get into the soundtrack and see what we think. So take it away, Nemo.
All right, class, let's get going here. This inaugural term of VGM 701, Advanced Esoteric OSTs, is almost over, and you've all been doing really well. Even you, Ryan.
What's that supposed to be?
And once again, I want to thank Prime VGM Minister Ed for allowing us to use the VGMbassy Summer Lounge for a temporary classroom. Your love of higher education is an inspiration for us all, right, class?
Yes.
Okay, but I don't want you guys to get complacent, which is why we're going to start out this morning with a pop quiz. I know. Hold on. Now, it shouldn't be that difficult for you. Messenger, if you throw that blue shell at Dyad, so help me, you'll be in the penalty box for the rest of class, which is going to mean an F0 for this assignment. See what I did there?
Seriously?
And Carly, that better not be a note you're thinking of passing to Alex, or you're going to be taking a VGM journey to detention.
Fine. Nice.
All right, now let's get to it. Todd, would you and Red Hua pass these packets out, please?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, hey, just a punk. Did I say turn the paper over yet? Come on. Okay. All right, now this is going to be another blind listen format.
Come on.
And the OST for today is the game Sora no Fudousan. All right, now, this game is extra obscure, so I'll allow you to buddy up with someone close to you.
Yeah.
VGM Minister Ed, why don't you and Cam Werme work together since you've been chatting since I walked in the door? And would somebody work with Phantomire? Honestly, I don't know why you always have to sit so far back, Dan. And by the way, if I hear any more about Mega Man X for the Super Nintendo, so help me. Yeah. All right, Bedroth?
I can help with that.
Okay, thank you. All right. Now, I hope you've been studying the course material, as I've been emphasizing all term. If you can't tell wavetable synthesis from frequency modulation at this point, you're going to have some challenges going forward. To remind you, what I want to see on this quiz is genre, platform, relative area, and region if possible. Extra credit for any other accurate information you can glean from listening. All right. Now, you all have the same recordings in the same order. As per usual, I've identified them by track name only. And they're in the same order as they would appear on the soundtrack release, sound test, and/or OST pack they can be found in. Okay, you can pick up your pencils and begin now.
All right, wow, thank you, Nemo. That was actually really well produced. It was pretty impressive.
It was a nice little sketch there.
Yeah, so in case you're wondering what all that means and you haven't listened to a Blind Listen episode before, as the class groaned about in Nemo's little educational session there. By the way, awesome cameos too. That was a lot of fun. Really cool to see like the community come together.
Yeah, that was fun.
We are listening to a soundtrack from this game, Sora no Fudousan, and Cam, have you ever heard of this game before?
Yeah, who hasn't? I mean, it's most people's favorite game at this point.
Of course, dripping with sarcasm. So we've never heard of this game before. We don't know anything about it. We don't know the composer. We don't know the platform, whether it's console, arcade. We don't know
idea.
when it came out. Anything about the game at all. All we literally have to go on is the name of the game and the name of the 14 musical tracks that we're going to be listening to today. Based on these tracks, we're going to try to figure out some key details. What system it might have been on, around what time it might have come out. He said region. I mean, I'm thinking it's probably going to be Japanese based on the name. Possibly composer. Literally anything that we can come up with.
Yeah.
The company that might have put it out. Whether it's, console, computer, arcade, etc. So we're going to try to piece all this together, and by the time we've listened to these 14 tracks at the end, we're going to kind of cement our individual or group theory. And at the end, we'll have another segment from Nemo where he will kind of pull back the curtains and let us know exactly what we've been listening to, and we'll see how closely we came to it. The big reveal. For all of you Discordians out there, I do have a specific channel on the VGMbassy server called Blind Listen Spoilers. That channel is specifically for folks that are listening to the show, have gotten all the way through the show. If you want to comment, speculate, talk about what you thought might have happened, it's a good place to put your thoughts down and share your thoughts with others so that the other listeners to the show who haven't gotten to this episode yet can remain spoiler-free. So take a look there if you want to chat about the show. And then eventually, a couple months down the road, if anybody wants to put anything about the Blind Listen in this VGMbassy channel or the off-topic channel, then that's totally fine. Just give everybody at least a couple weeks to listen to it. So I think we're good to go. For the sake of clarity, Nemo did reach out to me asking about how to send me tracks that were ripped from VGMrips.net. So that tells me right there that this is probably sequenced music, because that site is mainly FM stuff. But they do have some NES, they do have some sample-based stuff, so I think it'll be pretty easy for us as video game music aficionados to tell what kind of music technology we're listening to. But I'm kind of already ruling out any sort of Redbook, modern kind of streaming CD audio style stuff. I think we'll immediately be listening to some sequenced FM, PSG, sample-based stuff. Or there are some chips out there in some systems that do both PSG and FMs at the same time, so there might be a combination of any of those. The first track we're going to be listening to is called Floating Object in the Sky. And to me, that sounds like maybe something from a cutscene.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking, like an intro sequence.
Yeah, especially since it's at the top of the show.
Yeah.
We haven't even gotten to gameplay yet. So let's listen to Floating Object in the Sky. When we come back, we'll have maybe some more concrete theories about what's going on here.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we're back. That was Floating Object in the Sky. I'm impressed. I'm loving it so far.
Yeah, no, I really dug that. That was good. I think we sort of agreed that initially it really kind of struck me in particular as a Genesis or Mega Drive kind of sound.
100% FM.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Within the first couple notes, it was obvious.
Yeah. With sample-based stuff going on. Those drums
Yep,
are
the drums
absolutely
for sure.
sampled. Pretty clear samples.
Yeah.
So, maybe not necessarily Genesis Mega Drive because
Right.
their samples tend to be a little less
A little fuzzier.
fidelity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it could be an arcade game.
Mm-hmm.
It could be something from the PC98, the YM2608 chip has baked in drum samples that are pretty clear.
Right.
It could also be the Sharp X68000, the YM2151, and that it has a separate OKI sampler, which produces some pretty clear samples too. Stereo FM, and what seems like a good number of channels too. So I would absolutely rule out like the older YM2203, any of the older stuff from like the PC88, because those were pretty simple mono
Yeah.
capable FM chips.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to need you to give those details because for those systems, I'm not as well versed.
I know a fair amount about those FM chips, and generally, the three that I mentioned, well, the four that I mentioned there are the ones that you're going to find most often in the wild, whether it's on a console or an arcade machine, or a computer. So anything other than that would be a slight variation on any of those four chips. Or the YM2610 in the Neo Geo, but I know the entire Neo Geo library. This is not a Neo Geo game, so I don't think we're going to listen to any 2610B stuff here. So we've got a very rockin' kind of a tune.
Yep. Upbeat, super upbeat.
It could honestly be like an early Nobuo Uematsu track. I know he's got a real good ear for 50s like rockabilly stuff.
Yeah. To me, it sounded like a song you could race to. But again, this being so early, being the first track, it's unlikely to be like a level,
Right. Yeah, Floating Object. I mean, the Floating Object in the Sky almost. I was expecting to hear some sort of a slower, mysterious, like
foreboding,
filling you with awe or foreboding kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Having a really rockin' song like this was a bit of a jarring experience, even though it was a fantastic song.
Yeah.
So, all right. So at least we know FM. Fairly later on in the FM lifespan of chips. It's a fairly capable FM chip, and we don't really have any other clues other than that, so maybe some of our other songs will help us out. Our next track is called Introduction to Law. So maybe somebody's becoming a lawyer, passing the bar, I don't know. Again, this is a Japanese game, so a lot of these English titles might be transliterated from Japanese titles, so they might not be. There might be some English in there.
Favorite.
Some we might have to take with a grain of salt. Anyways, let's listen to Introduction to Law. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. That was Introduction to Law. And I'm puzzling a lot over this one. That one was really sexy. Really there's definitely not a lot of action happening right here. This could just be two people sitting in a room talking about, a setup or a tutorial section or something.
Right. Yeah, I'm getting like visual novel vibes from it.
Yeah, no, that's kind of where I'm at too. But I really liked that track. It was really complex and jazzy and, I don't know, swaying to it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm listening specifically to the drums because I know that in the YM2608 that's usually paired with the PC98, those baked-in drum samples, you can't really change the pitch. You've got your drum kit, and that's your drum kit, and you can't really tune them up or down. And I'm not hearing like dynamic snare hits. I'm not hearing changes in pitch on the snare. So I'm beginning to kind of lean towards maybe that chip, that system for this.
Interesting. Okay.
They're kind of using those samples. There were a couple of snare hits that were like cut short, like bup, which is fine. You can do that on that.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of leeway in terms of like I said, tuning, changing pitch, etc. So that's a possibility. It could just be that they're dumping those samples into the the YM2151 sampler and not modifying them much from what they've uploaded. So maybe there will be future ones that'll tell us more about that. The FM sounds are very rich,
crystal clear.
Yeah. There's very high pitched like triangles. I'm not hearing a lot of what I might consider to be PSG sounds. It sounds pretty purely FM to me. And they've got some really nice sweeps at the beginning that sounded a lot to me like the Tim Fallon Time Tracks stuff.
There's that in that intro, it does that kind of pitch up slide that sounds really smooth.
Yeah.
At first, it kind of sounds like I think we basically ruled out the Genesis or Mega Drive, but at first it kind of starts sounding like that, and then it does that pitch slide, and it's at that point it's like, oh, this is definitely something more sophisticated.
Right. We're talking more operations per channel there. We're also, I think, maybe I don't know, because I ruled out arcade on some of the other blind listens, and it ended up being an arcade game. But this sounds too slow-paced.
Yeah.
Too much like take your time, taking the information being given to you on the screen.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I haven't completely ruled out arcade, but I'm leaning more towards a Japanese PC at this point. PC98, Sharp X68000. FM Towns, maybe. Although that had the same chip that the Genesis had in it, but still possible.
Yeah.
An introduction to law. So could be somebody becoming a lawyer, somebody becoming a cop, somebody becoming, I don't know, some sort of, somebody learning the ropes of their job.
Right.
Whether it even be the laws of a school teacher or, whatever's going on, learning the rules. So
I'm also thinking it could be a scene where you're introduced to a person who is in law enforcement. You mentioned a little potential English earlier. I mean, this could be an example of introduction to the law or introduction to a law person.
Sure.
So maybe this is where the main character meets a secondary character that's a cop or something.
Right.
Like that.
Or their name is Law. Like Tekken has
Tekken,
martial law as a
Tekken
character.
spinoff, yeah.
So it could be just somebody named Law. It could be completely different. Not enough clues yet. Next track is called A Chemical Reaction of Embodied Magical Power. So now we're introducing some mystical elements. I mean, we had that floating object in the sky to begin with.
Right.
And then Introduction to Law sounds very kind of down to earth, very basic, but then we're getting back into like Harry Potter realm here.
A chemical reaction of embodied magical power. Let's do this.
Nemo's classroom introduction might be actually a hint in and of itself.
Yeah.
We might be dealing with students
Chemistry
learning
class.
about magic or something in this scenario. So anyways, a chemical reaction of embodied magical power. Let's hit it. A chemical reaction of embodied magical power. Yeah.
Pretty self-explanatory, I think.
Sure, absolutely. I think we know exactly what game we're listening to now.
Yeah.
No, I'm impressed with the complexity of the jazz.
Oh, yeah. I wish I knew more about theory because there's a lot of stuff going on in there that really strikes me as just very deeply, very, very interesting jazzy stuff that, again, I can't really get into the detail because theory really isn't my thing, but there's a lot happening there.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's got some incredible tones. It's got some very complex percussion going on. It's got some dynamic parts that kind of speed up, slow down. This feels like a song that's complex enough that you might hear it often.
Yeah.
I think we both kind of hit on that around the same time.
Yeah.
It feels like more of a general gameplay style track, but it's still so complex that I feel like it might be a visual novel kind of a thing.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's action.
Right. Again, I'm right with you on that. It feels like this is something that you're reading, discussing, trying to figure stuff out. And yeah, I mean, I'm still leaning towards PC 98. We had more complex percussion here. There was snare rolls, changes in velocity in the drum hits, but still no pitch changes. So it's not doing anything that I'm, looking at as impossible on the 2608 chip. So that's still in the running. I'm even more convinced now that it's probably a Japanese PC game. I don't think anything beyond this is going to really sway my opinion in that. Do you have any theories that you're thinking about? Any composers that you might be familiar with that might do something like this?
That first track, I thought of Masaharu Iwata a little bit because it had this sort of like jangliness to it.
You're talking about the object in the sky?
Yeah. But after, I mean, everything's kind of sort of very much felt like it's the same game. It's not like every track is like, this is a completely different thing. I mean, it's been changing up a bit, but it's very much sounds like it's in the same ballpark.
Right.
But initially I thought maybe it might have been him or something like, but I don't know. I mean, right now I really have no.
It could be a team of composers too. So, the 50s rock and floating object in the sky could be a different composer than the really jazzy stuff that we've been listening to for the last couple of tracks. So there's that. I'm not great with Japanese composers outside of like the 16 and 8-bit console eras. So going into games that were not released over here, like I'm sure this one was based on the fact that it doesn't have an English title equivalent, it's gonna be like a shot in the dark as far as composer goes for me. But I really like this one, and I'm really looking forward to what else we've got in this game.
Did SNK develop any games for those PCs, Japanese PCs?
Mainly arcade ports.
Yeah.
I don't think they did any visual novels or anything like that, and I think any of the arcade ports to those Japanese computer systems were normally done by outsourced dev houses. So nothing direct. But it could be that a composer that worked on SNK games did work on this game and just was either in freelance mode or, went on to do something else for Neo Geo or whatever. But that I don't know. Next track we're listening to is called Haruna Harukawa 2.
Ah, the sequel.
The sequel to a song we have not yet heard. Let's take a listen. We'll see what we find.
Welcome back. That was Haruna Harakawa 2.
Dos.
You may be wondering what happened to 1. I think we may find out later on.
Perhaps. Low-key, very chill.
No percussion.
No percussion, a lot of chimey percussion. I mean, there is, I think, percussion, but it's like bell percussion.
Yeah, possibly like a triangle. I guess triangle is a percussion. Yeah, I mean, that was very, very chill, very kind of spacey. I imagine even maybe playing a puzzle, doing this, a mini game or something. But like anything that's kind of obscure, it could be a cutscene. And you'd mentioned, that there are tracks that have sequels. Could be because it's cutscene 1, cutscene 2, and so on, or
something that happens multiple times in different ways. I thought, if it's a Japanese PC game, it could be an H scene, sexy time scene. Mm-hmm. There could be some adult content in this game. And I was started to think about, composers that did a lot of these visual novels that I'm familiar with, like Ryu Umemoto, Panda, Muse, a few of those guys that have just a really, really good grasp on FM music. And this sounds like someone, if it is one person, that can mold these FM channels any which way they see fit, and they're not kind of being limited by whatever predisposed pack tells them. So I'm going towards maybe some of the bigger names in terms of the more famous names in the West of these Japanese composers that worked on these PC games. Anything drawing you away from like a visual novel kind of a situation here?
No, not really. I mean, I think that's mainly where I am right now.
Yeah.
Is something along those lines. Something like a Ace Attorney kind of thing. Maybe.
Yeah, something where there's not like a lot of action going. There's no peril involved here far, anyway.
Right. Uh-huh.
So let's listen to the next one. The next one is Haruna Harakawa 3. So if we're looking at kind of an even tone here, then that means these scenes are all kind of the same but slightly different. If we end up with another like an action-filled kind of a tune, then that's going to be a different discussion. So let's see what this next one sounds like.
I imagine it's going to be hectic.
Do you? I'm going the other direction. I'm thinking it's going to be similar to this one, but different enough to give it its own feel.
Let's see.
All right, that was Haruna Harakawa 3. And I don't know, I don't think it fit either of our expectations of what it might have been.
No, I mean, my anxiety is up a little now.
Oh, yeah.
After that one.
This was a tension-building song, specifically.
Much,
and elongated tension. That's what she said. I'm like fully in visual novel mode here at this point. Or if there is gameplay, there are definitely cutscenes where you are reading a long amount of text. Because I feel like a tension-building song like this would be quicker and like have some sort of a climax and a cold end if it were a cutscene of some sort. But this is built so that you are reading through a lot of text during a tension-filled time.
Right. Yeah, and that, for me, it makes me think of Ace Attorney and games like that because there are tracks in that game in particular that are clearly constructed to kind of drone out over the course of a lot of dialogue, like where you'll have like one droning note and a lot of kind of like flitting notes underneath it.
Yeah.
And it kind of just like keeps at that pace through like a tense scene while you're reading dialogue. I can't imagine a track like this. Maybe it's for lack of imagination, but I can't. I'm having trouble fitting that into another scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine some sort of a somebody breaks into a building at night, and a night watchman comes, and you're hiding behind a wall, and they're about to find you, or the villain is chasing you somewhere, and you found a hiding space, and they might be, calling out to you, come out and play or whatever, and you're under a table. I think that kind of music would fit well in a scene like this too.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I just can't help but think there's dialogue happening too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some sort of text on the screen at this point. And I like that we kind of commented while we were listening to this. It doesn't build in like volume. It doesn't like
intensity
raise. The keys don't change to make you more tense.
It doesn't move a lot.
Yeah, there's more layers that are layered on towards the end of the loop, and that's what builds the tension here. There's just more instruments doing their thing.
Yeah.
And you get, like you said, there's like some theremin in there, wavering up and down, kind of ghost-like. There's like kind of almost like a harpsichord sound, playing a couple notes here and there.
A really dissonant melody.
Yeah, so there's stuff there that almost makes it a little bit spooky as well as it does filled with tension, and I don't know whether that's an intent of the composer because there's something spooky going on, or whether it's just that's how they decided to build the tension in this piece.
Right. So there are moments. Generally, I think that track is very kind of doesn't have a lot of low end to it. It just kind of lingers there at that mid-high kind of area, and then you get that bom 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 bom, where that bass comes in to kind of like maybe catch you off guard, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's a couple moments of there where it might kind of startle you a little bit if you were really intensely playing or reading what was going on the screen. But we do have a track called Combat next up, so that does imply some sort of action. There are visual novels out there that have combat in it, and you're basically just selecting your next action from a text box, like a turn-based RPG kind of a deal. So based on what we hear here, maybe we can make a decision on what kind of gameplay we're looking at in terms of combat.
I think this is going to throw us for a loop.
We'll see. Yeah, let's find out.
That was Combat, and I buy it. I buy it as some kind of intense conflict, whether it's figurative combat or mind games or something.
Yeah,
it could be. I mean, that could be anything. The game breaks away from its story to a scene where there's some kind of whether it's hand-to-hand combat or like car combat, or are they pulling out swords? Or?
Right. This is, obviously a part of the game that demands the player's attention, and probably a lot of that attention for some sort of quick action going on, whether it's like I said, a text-based visual novel style fight scene, or whether there's some actual, you controlling the player character in real time kind of a deal. I think this is a great combat tune. I think it's got a lot of energy to it. It's got some weird dissonant parts. There's those kind of like twinkly sounds that you get that like feel like you're inside a computer, but then there's some other kind of like techno house stabs that sometimes are dissonant and sometimes actually are in tune with the rest of the song. So it makes me feel like the things that you're fighting, or the thing that you're fighting, is a little strange. It's not just two people fighting each other. There's an element of kind of weirdness to this song. You mentioned the Streets of Rage soundtrack and Yuzo Koshiro. I kind of feel that with this one too. It's got that.
This fits right in there with that kind of
contemporary electronic music that Streets of Rage had.
Not that I'm suggesting that this is a beat 'em up. I think it's probably not.
Right.
But that's what that vibe is to me.
No, I agree. I don't think it's Yuzo Koshiro.
No.
But I think that there's some maybe influence there, perhaps. Great techno beat, boom, 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 the whole way through. Great use of techno sounds and layering. There's a lot of layers here. Also makes me think that there's probably not a lot of sound effects in the game itself.
I was thinking that too.
Usually when there's a lot of like thunderous sounds or spell sounds or whatever, you'll have more of a minimalistic kind of a soundtrack just to make space for those extra sounds, whether it be that they need the actual channels for the sound effects or it just gets too busy, with robust sound effects along with robust music. So I'm firmly kind of in PC 98 territory with this.
I'm wondering if being a like a pretty exclusively a very Japanese sort of centric system, there'd be some games with there's a lot of games from there that are like kind of an obscure, like a board game or something, but there's a narrative built around it.
Okay.
Like there'll be some dialogue and there'll be like some story developing, and then it cuts away and now it's a top-down view of a table where you're moving pieces around, and so it could be something you would not expect to be story based.
Yeah. Okay. I can follow you there.
Which could be, maybe it's a card game. Maybe the combat is like figurative, or it's not direct combat in the way we might be thinking.
Yeah, kind of a deck building kind of fighting game. Okay. There's like so many of these visual novels that were released in Japan. A lot of them did kind of try to break away from the mold a little bit to set themselves apart from all the other visual novels out there. Right. So it could be something like that. I don't know. But I think we should move on to our next one, which is a more civilized form of combat. Of course. We've got dueling coming up next. So it's I don't think that these might necessarily take place one after another in the game, but they're just kind of grouped together in the soundtrack because they're both for a similar kind of gameplay element or situation. So let's give a listen to Dueling. All right, we're listening to Dueling from Fudousan from Mystery System, Mystery Year, Mystery Composer, here on this Blind Listen episode of the VGMbassy. Cameron, thoughts?
I think there's a similarity. Obviously, the genre shifts from combat to dueling, right? You kind of noted that. The combat was more techno kind of beat sort of thing, and this is clearly more of a rock track. I think like the tempo is the same or similar, so one could follow the other if there's some sort of like battle royale or something.
Yeah, the tempo is the same, but I think it does feel less intense. I think the techno's a bit more driving. This one almost seems like it could be considered halftime if it was the same BPM. And there also are still little bleeps and bloops of what you would consider electronic music in with the standard rock kit, drums and bass and guitar. Some kind of Tim Follin vibes there a little bit. Maybe that's why Nemo chose this. There's a little bit of echoes of some of the stuff that he did on his one FM piece for Time Tracks. I don't know. I don't know what to think of this. It's for dueling. It might, we immediately think of like fencing or something like that, where it's a very kind of civilized, almost more of a game of chess than it is an actual combat scenario. But this one has kind of an element of cool, slick style to it.
Kind of a little bit of a badass kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Like, it could be even like dueling vehicles of some kind.
You're really stuck on this car stuff.
I don't know why. I don't know why that keeps popping into my mind. In my head, I'm also thinking like of a boat eliminator duel. Thing,
Okay. Interesting. I can see that.
I don't want to get too off track though, because let's pick a trajectory.
Yeah, I think that if it were a duel, it is kind of maybe an arena style situation where it's two combatants, but there's a crowd. There are set rules, and it's stylish action, like Devil May Cry style characters, kind of doing their thing, but also looking badass while they're doing it. And it's not two kids like pew-pewing at each other or something like that. Yeah. We do have that chemical reaction of embodied magical power track. There is magic in this world. It's not a straight up like this is Earth and an anime version of Earth kind of a deal.
Right.
Even if it is Earth, there are more powers available to these characters than there are in our real world. So this combat and this dueling could be of any form.
Right.
Mechs, magical, arcane stuff. I don't know.
Well, they're clearly making a distinction between combat and dueling. So combat, being that there's one called dueling, combat to me, I can't help but think that involves a group or something that ultimately gets whittled down to the final two people.
Yeah. Or combat's just like the level where you're just beating a bunch of henchmen or minor enemies. Yep. And then dueling would be like the boss of that level where you are... It's a one-on-one kind of a deal.
Right. Yeah.
And again, these could be Japanese titles that are just translated into English, so it might be boss battle or one-on-one fight, and the English translation system just turned it into dueling, and it might not be an accurate representation of what that level is.
Right. And then there's the next track. So let's see what happens now. Jelly beans and milk.
Jelly beans and milk.
Seems like the next logical step.
Of course, after you win your duel, you sit down for a nice meal of jelly beans and
or you just get showered in milk and have jelly beans thrown at you.
God.
Like confetti.
I quit. That's where I would just turn the game off. Anyways, all right, let's take a listen to it. We'll be right back.
That was jelly beans and milk. So that was pretty much what I anticipated. Some kind of levity in what's otherwise a pretty intense sort of game.
Intense mixed with chill, but always kind of on a more serious
note,
down-to-earth tone.
Right.
And I say down-to-earth as in not silly, not necessarily earthbound.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think, we both kind of thought to ourselves, this is going to be the quote-unquote goofy song out of the soundtrack, where there's some sort of comedic relief in there to kind of bring things out a little bit, brighten things up. You were talking about that typical anime girl with pigtails and striped knee socks and la la la, that kind of a thing. Yeah. And I feel like that kind of fits with this. Again, it's not so super silly that it's like a song that you'd find in like Puyo Puyo or something like that. Right. But it, as compared to what we've heard so far, this one has got kind of a childish quality,
whimsy
to it.
Yeah, childish, right? I mean, maybe it's like a little kid with a lollipop. Or literal jelly beans with spilling milk or something. Or maybe it's got absolutely nothing to do with any of that, and it's a shooter.
Who knows at this point? It could just be like a character has a weird dream and things are silly, but it's still they're still performing some sort of an action.
Yeah.
It's easy to overthink these things because you can kind of fit any song into any scenario if you modify enough things to make it fit. But, I really do think that we're still talking about a visual novel kind of a thing here, where at least the majority of the game is visual novel, and this is just a comedic style thing. It could be a character that you bump into multiple times during the game, and this is the song that plays when they are in the scene.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
We're also past the halfway point in terms of our soundtrack here, so of 14 tracks total, this would be track number 8. Nemo did eliminate a couple of tracks from the soundtrack just because we've done episodes of these blind listens where people have given me like 20 something tracks and it's just taken way too long to get through the show. So I don't think he took out too many. I think it was only 2 or 3 tracks total, so there might be some gaps in storyline here or there that may or may not impact how we perceive the game. But I trust him not to have removed anything that was extremely pertinent to the plot or to the soundtrack in general. So yeah, I think jelly beans and milk doesn't necessarily mean there are jelly beans and milk in the game. I think it's just kind of a euphemism for silly kid stuff.
Right.
Here's your lighthearted moment.
Yeah.
Here's your song for it. Next one coming up is the first in the 3...
The prequel.
The Haruna Harukawa trilogy.
Yeah.
We listened to 2 and 3. Now we're going to listen to Haruna Harukawa 1. All right, that was Haruna Harukawa 1, played out of order. Well, out of numerical order in the soundtrack. I don't know why it might play in a different numerical order in the game itself. But when you take these 3 songs in this Haruna Harukawa series, it seems like they increase in intensity between 1, 2, and 3. This was, I think, the most chill of the Haruna songs.
Agreed. But that build of intensity is kind of null and void though when you throw them out of order.
Correct.
You know?
Yeah.
Like you don't have that progression anymore. So, but you're right. I definitely agree with that.
Unless these Haruna scenes appear randomly, and for some reason this is just the order that they are in. I don't know. I mean, again, we're changing the game.
I know we're
theoretical rules to fit our narrative here.
Right.
So I don't know. I do like this one. Like you said, when we were listening to it, it's got kind of a bossa nova groove with a little bit of jazziness to it. There's some like rim shot percussion, some snaps, some very laid back vibes here.
Very much so.
Any idea where this might, or theories about what this might be?
I mean, more dialogue.
Yeah.
You know, like,
agreed.
it's inevitable at this point.
Haruna Harukawa might be a person.
Right.
And it might be a central figure in the story, girlfriend, love interest, something like that. And your attitude towards them might dictate what kind of music is playing in the background when you're discussing things with them. Again, you know, not a lot to go on here. These song titles they're kind of metaphorical in a sense, it seems sometimes, so it's difficult to really get a good grasp on, you know, it's not like journey to this particular city or fight against Gandalf or whatever. It's like
generic.
Yeah.
Do we have any sort of guarantee that this is the order in which you hear them in the game?
Well, Nemo did not change the order. We know that. And he said it is the order that you find them on the soundtrack. And I think he did mention something about it being in the order in the game. Although, you know, it's from VGM Rips. So if there was no official soundtrack released for the game, they will order the songs in the order that you would find them in the game. If there is an official soundtrack, even if that official soundtrack puts the songs out of order, they will match the order from the official soundtrack. So it could be a yes or a no. I find it unlikely that this game probably had an official soundtrack.
Right.
So I would say it's probably in order of the game. But again, I don't know why that would mean that this would be, you know, 2, 3, 1 in terms of these Haruna Harukawa songs.
Right.
So there's a lot of conjecture there.
Sure. I'm not sure this one is any more suggestive than the others about what's happening, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I take it as like a casual conversation. I don't feel any sense of danger here. I don't feel any trepidation. I don't feel any negative emotions. I feel like it's a lazy Saturday morning.
Yeah.
You know, you're just hanging out, having some coffee, talking about stuff, meeting somebody at a cafe for a quick snack, catching up with a friend. Lo-fi beats to study to style, you know?
Right, yeah.
There's not much going on. The next one might have some emotion to it, though. It's called Immediate Departure. So that might have some tension. Somebody's got to leave really quickly. Somebody's very sad somebody's going away. There's something going on in this next one that has a plot point to it, which is something we've kind of been searching for in this soundtrack the whole time.
Yep.
So I'm curious what Immediate Departure sounds like. Let's give it a whirl.
And that was Immediate Departure. Definitely an intense situation. Something just happened, whether it was a person leaving or somebody noticed someone was missing or something happened that forced everybody to piece out of there immediately.
Yeah. We were talking about how, the potential for sad emotions and stuff. I didn't feel any of that here. I feel like there might be some stealth going on. Maybe you got to get out of this building because there have been some interlopers looking for you, and now you've got to get out without being seen. I love the bass line. And the drums and bass in this track are so groovy and so, I don't know, James Bond style stuff going on. I really, really liked that. And just little stabs of there's a little bit of flute and a little bit of that digital stuff going on, and there was a lot of intrigue, I think is the best way I can describe this one.
Yeah, I got a lot of that triangle happening that really reminded me of a Tim Fallon kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely an intensity to whatever is going on here that Haruna Harakawa 1 did not have. Assuming that preceded this one. Again, it's more dialogue of a little more shifty kind of nature.
Yeah. I mean, I could also feel this as being kind of a first-person dungeon crawly kind of a segment where you're moving up, moving left, moving right, trying to figure out how to get through this maze
navigating,
of whatever it is to leave this area that you're in. Maybe you've been kidnapped and you've, gotten free from your restraints and you're kind of scooting out of the building or something like that.
Jumping into a locker as people walk by.
Yeah, right. And still text-based dialogue on the screen, but less conversation and more what do you do? Choose your own adventure, get yourself out of here kind of a deal. And it's fun. It's great. We were talking about instrumentation. We were briefly talking about Tim Fallon's ability on the Time Tracks soundtrack to manipulate instruments to sound like their real-life counterparts, and I think this composer has a not as good of a grasp, but a very good grasp on that as well, using appropriate sounds in appropriate ways that they'd be used in a real-life analog.
Right. Tim Fallon just always comes up as an example because he's the example, but you make these tones, these synths and the various sounds, you make them sound like they're being played by human hands. And like you pointed out with most of the percussion we've heard so far, it sounds like it's mostly just kind of cut and paste as is bank of sounds that are just plugged in without really any means to manipulate them. Right. And because these songs are so complex and we hear the manipulation that's going on and the way the instruments are done, this composer or these composers clearly have that ability. So I agree with you that it sounds like that the percussion just doesn't have that feature, that function.
Yep, agreed. And I did, mention guys like Panda and Muse who have written their own sound drivers or are part of an organization where the sound drivers were written specifically for them. And I feel like this is that kind of a scenario where these guys just program as they go, and they're not just entering notes willy-nilly into a system. There's actually some live element of performance there that can directly translate into sequenced VGM music. Because a lot of this would be too complicated to do just by A5, A6, sustain, that
Sometimes
kind of
you
thing.
got to let composers be composers.
Yeah, exactly.
And leave the other stuff to the programmers.
Right. Or if you're a programmer, to program a system that lets you perform the way you want to.
Yeah.
So I think that's on the right track as far as what we're looking at here. The next one could be a very, as perilous as this track sounded, the next one is called 100-Meter Dash on a Tightrope at an altitude of 100 meters. So you're 100 meters up, doing a dash on a tightrope.
I'm imagining this to be this is figurative.
Maybe,
yeah.
We shall see. All right, so 100-meter dash on a tightrope at an altitude of 100 meters. Let's hit it. right, this certainly sounds like you might be doing a 100-meter dash on a tightrope at an altitude of 100 meters. That was a great track. It was extremely tense. And again, before we broke for the song, you were talking about whether this might be a figurative kind of a thing or whether you're literally doing this in the game. And I think it could be either.
Sure.
I love you were talking about like breakbeaty style percussion, and I think that kind of fits here. I think as far as this composition software would allow them to do it, they were trying to go for like a breakbeat style drum thing.
Hectic.
Based on that combat song where it was more of a techno. I feel like the composer's probably well versed in different types of electronic music and techno and stuff, so that they might have been going for that feel with this. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
I don't think it's literal jelly beans and milk. So I'm
yeah, okay.
I'm tempted to not take any of these tracks at face. Not any of them, but some of these I just don't take at face value.
Yeah. It just seems like a really specific kind of title.
But it could be like I was mentioning. I'm envisioning maybe something flight related where. Luke shooting the torpedoes into the Death Star. Just like a straight run, like a mad dash to the goal while you're being pursued. Or something like a threading the needle high up. You're on a rail. And you've got an objective. And
a really intense situation where you're traveling in a straight line.
Whatever it is, you've got to get it done now.
Yep.
But I mean, there's been nothing so far that's led me to think that there's a aircraft or flight happening.
Yeah, and nothing to really clue us in as to whether or not these song titles are metaphorical or not either. Like, we literally don't know enough to know, embodied magical power, but then you're also doing a 100-meter dash on a tightrope.
Floating object in the sky sounds pretty... That doesn't sound figurative.
It could be a cloud for all we know.
Sure,
again, there's
something happening aloft.
It's so vague.
Yeah, right. But there's something up there. We've got a couple things that clue us into something happening up there.
This actually does. I said before that this probably didn't have an official soundtrack, but now I'm kind of thinking that it might, because these song titles, if a game doesn't have an official soundtrack, generally the song titles are just where they play in the game. So it would be up to the person who ripped the soundtrack to give the music the names, and they would normally say Harajuku Station or classroom or something. It would be like the physical location of where you hear it. When you get these kind of weird metaphorical titles, it's usually because that's what the composer named them.
Yeah.
And these packs on VGM rips would be named for in order of and named for the official soundtrack. So
tracks on an album.
Right. So I'm changing my stance on this to say that these are probably what were on the official soundtrack release. That might clue me into the fact that maybe it is a bigger composer name, somebody well enough known that having a physical CD for this soundtrack would be a viable thing, at least in Japan, obviously not here in North America. But that also kind of puts us more in the dark about what the songs are titled, because they could be, like you said, very figurative and not necessarily named for where they appear in the game.
But there's a I wonder if that 100 meters is operative in some way. It's a 100-meter dash at an altitude of 100 meters.
So it's a square, basically.
Right.
100 meters up, 100 meters forward,
Yeah.
And it's not like a terribly long distance. If you were in a jet plane or something, you'd probably be going miles instead of meters.
Right.
I don't know. I am just as confused as I was about this game as I was when we listened to the first track. All I know is that we have a pretty good idea of the genre of game being visual novel and the system of the game. I'm going to say PC98. Do you have any other thoughts at this point about what else it might be?
No, as far as that goes, I'm pretty on board with that. You know a lot more about that stuff than I do, but what I have heard in the past and the other episodes you've done of focusing on those types of systems, it fits right in with that stuff. So
yeah,
I mean, I definitely settle on that with you.
Okay, cool. maybe this 100-meter dash didn't go so well because the next track is called Big Mistake.
Things seem to go wrong every so often in this game.
Yeah, and we're also coming towards the end of the soundtrack too, so maybe this is that kind of twist in the plot where things suddenly get a lot more intense than they were before. Not that a 100-meter dash up in the sky is not intense or anything. But all right, let's listen to Big Mistake, and we'll come back and give our thoughts. Big Mistake from Sora no Fudousan, released in the mid-90s for the PC 98. I'm pretty certain about that. Absolutely certain about that.
Good. I like your...
I'm 100% certain about that.
That's good to hear.
By, I don't know what composer, but like I said, I mentioned those three big names, Umamoto, Panda, Muse. I'm giving a good chance it's one of those three, but I don't know beyond that. Visual novel. This one's creepy AF.
Yeah.
What'd you think about it?
Something went wrong. There's something that's just off right now in the development of the story.
Yeah. I mean, the big mistake is indicative of something bad has happened to the protagonist through their own devices. So I don't know what that could be, but it gives me a little more hint that this is definitely more of a intense story than just like an action game. Not that we were really going in along those lines anyway.
Oh, yeah. The tone, the mood is always moving.
And it feels, again, fantastic drum work.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool bass line. Weird, mysterious kind of lead instruments coming in and out. Lots of really unique sounds that I haven't heard a lot in FM world.
Right.
Some like really kind of ghostly boo boo doo 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 come in, and then come back out again. All of these songs are kind of designed to make you feel really uncomfortable, really tense, really anxious about things, coupled with some really forward momentum action. But I'm not getting a lot of positive, heroic stuff here.
No.
Like, your protagonist is not confident. They're always in peril. They're always trying to get out of whatever situation they're in. And there's no like dun da 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 like going to beat the boss and I've got this. Everybody behind me, let's charge. I'm not getting any of that from this soundtrack at all. So I'm going with there is some sort of magic, but the protagonist is kind of thrust into this situation involuntarily. Yeah. It's not a heroic knight gone off to beat the dragon to get the princess or anything like that.
This is like it strikes me as kind of like a peak conflict, like third act, like everything is sort of coming to a head and it's about to kind of resolve, or we're close to it.
Sure. I mean, the next track is called Last Magic. So, I mean, and we've only got 2 more tracks left. So I'm assuming this last or this penultimate track is going to be a final battle, a climax of some sort, and our last track might be the ending credits roll or something like that. So this might be this last magic track might be the last gameplay oriented tune that we're going to be listening to.
Final battle or something.
Yeah, exactly. So Last Magic coming up next.
So that was Last Magic. That really, I have a vivid idea, like in my head, the militant sort of nature of that song and that droning note, like you were saying, really makes me think someone is planning the final move.
Right. There's a larger organization at work here.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the other tracks seem to, at least to me, both in title and in sound, kind of pointed me towards a lone protagonist, not very confident. This one's got that swagger, that military might, kind of finally we've gathered our forces, we've gathered our resources. Yeah, this is where we're gonna finally beat the big bad or whatever it is. And I don't know, for me it doesn't really jive with the sound of the rest of the soundtrack.
Nope, not really.
This sounds something like, it was funny when you popped over, we were talking with Mila about Game of Thrones, and you talked about where suddenly the whole situation changed during a big battle.
Yeah.
And like something happened out of the ordinary, and there was a big difference. And this kind of almost feels like that. Maybe not directly from Game of Thrones, but like something happens that changes the landscape of the game.
Yeah.
And what that is, I don't know, but it sounds like there's some sort of a force of soldiers, some sort of steadiness comes to the heroic side of the game, and now there's the confidence in this song
right.
with the snare rolls and stuff like that to finally go and get it. Those long, drawn-out chords that are like rolling in the background there do not waver, and they don't sound like they're unsure of themselves. It just sounds like this is the get behind me and charge kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But leading up to the charge, not the charge itself.
Right. The planning of the charge, I think. It
Right,
sounds like.
right, exactly. The
strategy.
getting into formation or, building that strategy. So I don't know, man. Any final thoughts as we get into our last track about what this game might be about?
Well, this was definitely a great, selection for a blind listen, because there's nothing indicating.
It keeps you on your toes.
Oh yeah, no, I mean you could make a guess in any direction and be the odds it could be anything. You know? I don't know. I mean, I'm still pretty much thinking it's very narrative based, lots of dialogue, a lot of mood changes. It sounds like there might be a few character themes in there. So maybe characters that appear often.
Which would be on par for a visual novel.
Exactly, yeah. So I think we're on the right track there.
Yeah, I think so too. I think in terms of gameplay style, I think visual novel is kind of nailed.
Yeah.
I think in terms of music technology, I think PC98, YM2608 sound chip, I'm very confident in that. You seem to be following in my confidence.
Yeah, for sure. And did you not do a PC98 episode? It might have even been Pixel Tunes.
It was towards the end of the Pixel Tunes radio run.
Where you did like, it was mostly all adult games, because that's essentially all that's
essentially
on
all there is on that system. Yeah. Which is why I was thinking that some of those Haruna Harukawa songs might be, hentai scenes or something like that.
Right.
So just because they're so ubiquitous on that, it's hard to come across a game that doesn't have that kind of content in it.
Jelly beans and milk could be some kind of euphemism we haven't explored yet.
Get out of my basement. That could be very true. Let's listen to the last track, and then we'll shore up our final opinions. And Nemo has also given us a final audio recording that will supposedly reveal all. We'll find out. So the next one and the last one is called Exile to the West. Our last track of the show from Sora no Fudousan, that was Exile to the West. And sleepy tune at the end, at least. It's got a very music box, lullaby kind of feel. I didn't expect a song talking about, exile to sound like this. It was definitely an ending song.
Unless it's like a voluntary exile where you're
Happy to be exiled?
escaping to safety or something.
Oh, okay. Maybe a lot of these stealthy songs are because you're escaping some sort of a compound, country, state, government, and whatever it is that's oppressive, and you finally exiled yourself to freedom, or pissed off the bad guys enough that they send you away, and they're like, never come back.
Right.
Enjoy your freedom, you jerks.
Yeah. Or you've exiled the villain
Yeah,
to the West.
I guess.
You-
Go bother the Americans.
Yeah, exactly. yeah. You exiled this person to New York, where they have to live out their days living in exile in the city somewhere.
Yeah, right. They're a jerk, but they'll just fit in with everybody there.
Yeah. No one will notice them there.
Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like as an ending song, it's really low key for the military buildup in Last Magic. I expected more of a heroic, kind of a fanfare-ish style ending tune, but instead got something that was like very mild, very good, but very mild. So it just kind of goes to show you that even at the end of the soundtrack, it's still throwing us curveballs. There's just not enough information to really get a good grasp on what's going on.
No.
All right, so my final theory is that you are a hapless protagonist thrown into a situation beyond your control. It takes place in modern times, but there's also magic. So it's kind of mystical, whatever, but it also takes place on Earth in cities or whatever. And I'm basing that on the fact that we've got some magical imagery in the titles of the songs, but we've also got some techno, some jazz, some Shin Megami Tensei Persona style music in here that kind of indicates that it's very earthly. We're not looking at, Lord of the Rings style music or anything going on.
Right.
Mixed with that kind of weirdness, so there's some sort of invasive force or extraness to this kind of down-to-earth world that we're looking at that gives it some extra fantastical abilities. Yeah. There's some sort of an ending where you are teamed up with a military force, and the end is kind of romantic, maybe? Like, maybe there is a love. Perhaps. Maybe it is that Haruna Harukawa. Maybe you get together at the end, etc.
Yeah.
Also, so PC-98, visual novel style. I'm looking at a big, more well-known name as far as a composer goes. I threw out Umemoto, I threw out Panda, I threw out Muse. One of those three possibly, or another name I might recognize. That's as far as I have. Oh, in mid-90s. I'm looking at that because, like, post Streets of Rage, it's got some of that Koshiro techno influence there. So it's going to be like 96 or later, is my theory.
Yeah.
What about you?
No, I mean, still sticking to the, heavy on the narrative. I still can't shake the idea that there's something happening in the air. Like
you can feel it calling in the air tonight?
Yeah. And, I'm curious to see what terminology that's used in some of these tracks, how much of it is figurative and how much of it is literally right out of the game.
Right. Yeah, good point too.
And also how the combat and the dueling fits in. Like I'm really curious about that too.
We might not get all these answers by the end of the show.
Right.
But, Nemo does have a reveal that we're going to play now.
Can't wait to hear how the class
how well they did.
Yeah.
All right, so let's listen to Nemo as he reveals what this game was all about. We'll see whether our guesses were correct. If you're guessing, listeners, how close did you get? I'm really curious to hear about that too. Again, you can post all of that in the Blind Listen Spoilers channel on the VGMbassy Discord. And all right, let's get to it.
Okay, and time. Put down your pencils and let's go over the answers. Metal Man and Carlos, would you two please pick up the tests and put them on my desk?
Yes.
Okay, while they're doing that, I wanted to let Alex, Carly, Metal Man, The Dyad, Ryan Steele, Phantomire, Todd, Shukapow, Bedroth, and of course Kung Fu Carlito know that I graded those extra credit field recordings you sent me, and you all get A++. Excellent work, guys. Okay, so the name Sora no Fudousan is of course Japanese, and it roughly translates to empty floating property. Or if you use Google, empty floating assets. Anyway, I'm assuming that most of you figured out by the track titles that this game is a doujin visual novel. Hopefully I didn't violate any administrative rules with that one, Prime VGM Minister. Better to beg for forgiveness than ask permission, right? However, anyway, the twist here is that this game is actually marketed for all ages. So those of you who are hoping for some steamy adults-only fare, sorry to disappoint. The story is set in the near future where magic has been discovered and is subject to endless bureaucracy and regulations. The game centers around a stupid gag in which a woman's house gets accidentally moved and rotated by magic, I think. Anyway, I'm sure you can all tell the OST is FM synthesis with some nice sampling. So those of you who guessed the YM2151, you get 5 extra points. So this one came out for the X68000 back in 2004, which is pretty late for that platform. The composer is Hiroyuki Mizuno, who's only credited with about 5 similarly obscure visual novels. Bummer considering the awesome work he did here, right? Okay. We're going to get into the textbook now, but first... Oh my, how time flies. Okay, I guess we'll tackle that textbook next week. Enjoy the weather out there and be safe, all. And remember, there's no Bassy like the VGMbassy, right?
But more often, find beauty and charm.
You were right. I mean, there were some details there that weren't quite right, but for a blind listen, like, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I feel like I was actually really surprised it was not the PC-98. I think I overestimated or underestimated the sample qualities of the Sharp X68000 sound hardware, for sure. Because I really did feel like those baked-in samples from the PC-98.
Yeah.
So...
that was the one thing that was really cluing you into that, I think, the most.
Yeah, the percussion for sure. Yeah. And it's possible they used the same percussive samples that were on the 2608 chip, you know, and they just uploaded them into the 2151 sound system. But that's cool. I mean, so I was pretty close with definitely visual novel, so we had that down.
Oh, yeah.
I called it with the earthly setting with magic. So I had that down, which I was very impressed with. The fact that it was not a adult-oriented game kind of surprised me, but I wasn't totally convinced on that to begin with. I said a couple of those might have been some H scenes, but I didn't really hear a lot of that really steamy sensual stuff that you would get, that play during those scenes.
Nothing in the track titles that's overtly suggestive.
Yeah. Exactly. And there's probably not an English translation of this game, so it really wouldn't be possible for us to kind of play through it anyway. So
there's got to be something on YouTube or something like that.
For a lot of these, usually not. Usually what you can do is, get a translation app on your phone and you take a picture of the screen or you hold it up to the screen and it'll translate the text for you. And you can kind of use that to play it, but for a lot of these, because there's so much text, there's a bunch where people just have not gotten to it yet to go through and translate it, or there just hasn't been enough call for it to be translated. And the composer, too, I was surprised that it was kind of a relatively obscure composer.
What do you say he did 5 other?
Yeah, he said about 4 or 5 other visual novels. But obviously, nothing that came out in the West, nothing that was like a traditional kind of a video game or anything of that sort. Oh, and Nemo, to answer your question, yeah, visual novels are absolutely acceptable for blind listens. Like I said, it was one of my first guesses right off the bat, so it's not like I was excluding them to begin with or anything like that. But there will be other blind listens in the future, and I'm not, I don't want everybody to just start sending me Japanese visual novel games.
That's all you're going to get.
Because there's a lot that I don't know, but it would get kind of, predictable after a while. Oh, it's another FM song. I wonder which Japanese computer this one was for. But I'm interested in, checking this out, checking out some graphics, just to see what kind of visuals accompany these tunes and to kind of get a little bit more knowledge about what this game is all about. This was really fun. I had a great time.
Yeah.
There's some great music. I would never have thought to check the soundtrack out.
Yeah, I'm curious to check out this composer's other works because they clearly have a very solid grasp of their. I would bet they're trained, at least trained jazz musicians,
right?
Classical background. Perhaps.
This may have just been a side job to make some extra money in between gigs, playing in a real jazz band or composing for more commercial entities, TV, music, movies, something like that. Because there's enough talent here where it's like this isn't this person's like hobby,
right?
they know their stuff,
right?
For sure. Yeah. Man, so thank you, Nemo, and thank you everyone else who contributed to that little segment at the beginning and the end there. That was really, really cool to see, like, the entire community getting
cool
together.
To hear everybody.
And it was all done behind my back, completely unaware. So that was very, very cool. Speaking of the community and all of my patrons, I'd like to thank you guys for your immense amount of support over the years as we roll towards episode 100. If you want to find out the track list, more about the game, more about the composers, you can go over to the VGMbassy.com. And on that website, you can comment on the post of this show if you want to tell me more about what you think about the show, what you thought about the game, and what you thought about the soundtrack. And there's also a Discord widget on the side of the page where you can join our wonderful Discord and hang out with lots of our patrons and listeners, folks like Nemo, folks like Cam, folks like a lot of the names that you heard during Nemo's little classroom segments there. I'd like to thank Indira J for the art and Dread, aka Chevin Hughes, for the podcast theme song, and also all of our Patreon patrons at the tourist level, Cameron Shiles and the Phantomire, our VG Emissary tier, Periodical, Chris Murray, Chris Myers, Gannon11, Keyglyph, Kyle Kroll, The Dyad, Professor Tom, our audio attaché members, Cameron Werme.
Yeah.
Cameron Werme, thank you very much. Carlos, Muddle Madness, and Scott McElhone. And our special agent, Ryan Steele. You guys are awesome.
You're awesome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not sure what to do about the VGM primetime for this episode. I might do something different, like a playlist of some cool chiptunes or something like that. But keep a lookout for that, patrons. And in 2 weeks, we'll be back with a holiday-oriented Embassy exclusive. Yeah, we're not doing a Christmas episode this year because we're so close to the episode 100. I'm trying to putting all of my creative juices into our 100th episode.
Yeah.
So we'll do a holiday Embassy exclusive, and then we will go from there. And that'll be a lot of fun. Cam, thanks for hanging out with me. This was a blast.
Totally. Thanks for having me. I've always wanted to do one of these. I've enjoyed submitting games and listening to people figure it out, but it's nice to be on the other side of it.
Yeah, I thought originally that we did do one together, but I was remembering that Scourge Hive episode that we did, and because it was a single game focus, I transposed that in my head as being a blind listen instead of that was a great episode. And I think I told you Jake Hoffman actually listened and had a really good time listening to it too, so that was fun. Anyways, thanks again, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks with an Embassy exclusive. Stay awesome. Bye everyone.
Bye-bye.